At Thanksgiving, my billionaire grandpa lifted his glass, smiled warmly, and said my name. Sophia, he announced, loud enough for the entire table to hear. I'm so glad you're enjoying the college fund. I froze. My fork slipped from my fingers and clinked against the plate. The room seemed to tilt, like the ground had shifted beneath my chair. What college fund? I asked. My dad choked on his drink, coughing hard. My mom went pale so fast it scared me. No one spoke, no one laughed. The silence felt thick, heavy, wrong. Then my little cousin Emily leaned toward me, her voice barely a whisper. Wait, you didn't know? Every face at the table told me the same thing before anyone said a word. This wasn't a joke. This wasn't a misunderstanding. And in that moment, I realized my life, the loans, the late nights, the sacrifices had been built on a lie no one ever planned to confess. Before that sentence shattered everything, Thanksgiving had felt normal. Not warm, not loving, just carefully polished, like everything else in my family. My grandfather's house was massive, the kind of place that looked more like a private estate than a home. Long driveway, perfect hedges, windows glowing gold against the cold November sky. Walking inside always made me feel like I had to shrink myself a little, like my presence alone might smudge something expensive. I arrived wearing the same navy sweater I'd owned since sophomore year. It still fit, barely. I'd debated buying something new, but rent was due next week, and I had already pushed my credit card further than I liked to admit. Again, no one noticed. They never did. The dining room looked like it came straight out of a magazine, linen tablecloth, real silverware, candles placed with mathematical precision. My relatives moved around effortlessly, laughing, sipping wine, talking about vacations and business deals I didn't understand. I smiled when expected, nodded when spoken to, took the seat I was given near the end of the table. That was usually where I belonged. My cousin Emily sat across from me, swinging her feet under the table, already bored. She gave me a quick smile. I smiled back. She was the only one who ever did that without expecting anything in return. Dinner began like it always did. Polite compliments, light jokes, my grandfather carving the turkey as if it were a ceremonial duty, not just a meal. My grandmother passing dishes while pretending not to notice who took seconds and who didn't. I didn't. I never did. I listened as my uncles talked about investments, and my aunts compared schools and tutors. I listened to my parents laugh along, perfectly relaxed, like they weren't the same people who had ignored my messages when I stressed about tuition payments 2 months earlier. I told myself, again, that it was fine. I was used to being the independent one. The one who managed. The one who didn't need help. That label had followed me my entire life, and I wore it like armor even when it was cutting into my skin. When someone asked how school was going, I said, great. When they asked about work, I said, busy, but good. No one asked how tired I was. No one asked how I was paying for everything. And I didn't ask them either. Because in my mind, this was just how things were. My family had money. I didn't. There was no mystery in that. Some people were born closer to the center of the table. Others learned how to survive at the edges. I had accepted that. Or at least, I thought I had. I remember reaching for my glass when my grandfather stood up, the room gradually quieting. Toasts were his thing. They always came after the main course, when everyone was relaxed and full, when no one was prepared for anything uncomfortable. He smiled at the table, proud and calm, and then he looked directly at me. That was when everything changed. My grandfather raised his glass a little higher, waiting until every conversation faded into silence. To family, he said warmly, to health, and to watching our grandchildren grow into people we can be proud of. Glasses clinked. Someone murmured agreement. I took a small sip of water, already preparing myself for the moment to pass. Then he smiled at me. And, Sophia, he said, his voice casual, almost amused. I'm glad you're enjoying the college fund. The words landed wrong. Not loud, not dramatic, just wrong. I stared at him, convinced I had misheard. That maybe he meant someone else. That maybe there was a joke coming that I hadn't caught yet. My voice stuck in my throat. What college fund? For a second, no one moved. Then my dad coughed hard, his drink going down the wrong way. He grabbed his napkin, eyes wide, avoiding everyone's gaze. My mom's hand froze around her fork. The color drained from her face so quickly, it made my chest tighten. My grandfather frowned. The fund, he repeated, slower now. The one we set up when you were born. We've been contributing to it for years. The room felt smaller, tighter, like the walls had leaned in to listen. I don't know what you're talking about, I said. My heart beat loud in my ears. I've never had a college fund. Across the table, my aunt's smile faded. One of my uncles shifted in his chair. No one met my eyes. Then Emily leaned closer to me, her voice small and confused. Wait, she whispered. You didn't know? That was the moment I stopped hoping this was a misunderstanding, because everyone else already knew. My mom stared down at her plate like it held the answers she was desperately searching for. My dad swallowed and reached for his glass again, his hands shaking just enough for me to notice. My grandfather looked between us, confusion turning into something sharper. You didn't tell her? He asked quietly. No one answered. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable, pressing against my chest. And suddenly, I wasn't just embarrassed. I was afraid, because I could feel it. Whatever the secret was, it wasn't small. And it wasn't an accident. My grandfather slowly lowered his glass. You really didn't know? He asked, his voice no longer warm, but careful like he was afraid of the answer. I shook my head. No, I've been paying for school with loans. I work 2 jobs. I thought. My voice cracked. I thought we just didn't have the money. My mom's fork clinked against her plate. Sophia, please, she said quietly. This isn't the time. My chest tightened. Then when was the time? I asked. Because I would have loved to know before signing another loan. My dad cleared his throat, eyes fixed on the table. We didn't think you needed to know, he said. I stared at him. I didn't need to know I had money set aside for my education? My grandfather's expression changed. The confusion faded, replaced by disbelief. That fund was created for her, he said slowly, specifically for her education. Every birthday, every holiday, even when business was tight, we added to it. My aunt leaned forward. Wait, she said. Then who's been managing it all these years? No one answered. My mom's fingers tightened around her napkin. We used it, she said quickly, like if she spoke fast enough, the words wouldn't hurt as much. For the family, for expenses, emergencies. Used it? I repeated. My dad finally looked up. We planned to replace it, he said. Things were hard. The house needed repairs, medical bills. We thought it was temporary. I let out a shaky laugh. So, while I was skipping meals and working nights, you were spending my college fund and calling it temporary? My little cousin had gone silent now, her eyes wide. My grandfather pushed his chair back slightly, his jaw tightening. That money was never yours to use, he said. We trusted you. The word trust hit harder than any accusation. I looked at my parents, really looked at them and realized something terrifying. They hadn't forgotten to tell me. They had decided not to. And in that moment, the story of my life started to unravel. The room felt unbearably quiet after that. No music, no clinking glasses, just the low hum of the chandelier above us and the sound of my own breathing, uneven and shallow. How much? I asked. No one answered. How much was in the fund? I repeated, louder this time. My grandfather hesitated, then sighed. By the time you turned 18, it was a little over $40,000. We kept adding after that. 40,000. The number slammed into me harder than I expected. My hands trembled under the table. That could have covered my tuition, I said slowly. My books, housing. I wouldn't have had to choose between groceries and gas. My mom's eyes filled with tears. Sophia, you don't understand how hard it was for us. I laughed. It came out sharp, brittle. No, you don't understand how hard it was for me. My dad rubbed his temples. We were trying to keep everything together. Your brother needed help. The house. My brother? I cut in. The one who never went to college? That's not fair, my mom snapped, her voice rising. You were strong. You always managed. The words landed like a verdict. So, because I didn't fall apart, I deserved less? I asked. Because I figured it out, you figured you didn't have to? My grandfather's voice cut through the tension, low and controlled. You let her take out loans. My dad flinched. We didn't stop her. You let her struggle, he corrected, while spending money that was never meant for you. My aunt looked away. My uncle stared at the table. No one defended my parents. I pushed my chair back and stood, my legs shaking. I worked nights. I missed classes because I was exhausted. I told myself it was normal, that everyone was struggling. I swallowed hard. But I was struggling alone. My mom reached for my hand. I pulled away. You didn't just take money, I said, my voice breaking. You took choices from me. You took my trust. My dad stood up too, anger flashing across his face. You're making this a bigger deal than it needs to be. I met his eyes. You made it big the moment you lied. The table had turned against them now. I could feel it. The unspoken judgment. The realization spreading through the room. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't the quiet one anymore. I was the truth they could no longer avoid. I didn't finish dinner. I don't even remember standing up, only the sound of my chair scraping against the floor and the sudden rush of cold air against my skin as I stepped outside. The night felt sharper than it should have, like it was cutting straight through me. I sat in my car for a long time with the engine off, my hands resting uselessly in my lap. $40,000. The number kept looping in my head, over and over, refusing to settle. That money wasn't just tuition. It was time, sleep, security. It was every shift I worked when my body begged me to stop. Every loan document I signed with shaking hands. I drove back to my apartment without turning on the radio. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I did something worse. I started digging. I pulled up old emails from my grandfather, messages I'd skimmed for years without really reading. Added something extra for your future. Just making sure everything's taken care of. At the time, I thought they were just affectionate words from a wealthy man who liked to exaggerate. Now they felt like evidence. The next morning I made a call. The bank representative sounded confused when I gave her my name. You're the beneficiary, she said slowly. But you were never notified? No, I replied. My voice was steady, even though my hands were shaking. I wasn't. She put me on hold. When she came back, her tone had changed. The fund has been withdrawn from consistently over the past several years, she said. Every transaction was authorized by your parents. I closed my eyes. How much is left? I asked. There was a pause. Nothing. Nothing. The word landed heavier than silence. I thanked her and hung up, staring at my phone like it had betrayed me too. Later that day, I sat across from a legal advisor on campus. My documents spread neatly between us. He read everything twice, then leaned back in his chair. Sophia, he said carefully, this may qualify as misappropriation, especially if the funds were designated for educational use. I swallowed. Are you saying they broke the law? He didn't answer right away. I'm saying, he replied, that you have grounds to protect yourself. Protect myself. That was the first time anyone had framed it that way. That evening, my phone started buzzing. My mom first. Please call me. We can explain. You're overreacting. Then my dad. This is more complicated than you think. We were doing our best. I didn't respond, because suddenly, everything was clear. They hadn't just spent my money. They had gambled with my future, assuming I would absorb the damage quietly like I always had. And for the first time, I understood something that terrified me and set me free at the same time. If I stayed silent now, I would be helping them erase what they did. So I didn't. I opened a new document on my laptop and began preparing the paperwork that would change everything. Not out of revenge, but because what they took from me deserved to be named and held accountable. I didn't tell my parents what I was doing. Not at first. I needed time to breathe, to think without their voices filling my head, bending the story until I almost doubted myself again. But silence has a way of pulling people out of the shadows. 2 days later, my phone rang. Blocked number. I almost ignored it, almost. Sophia, my mom said the second I answered. Her voice sounded thin, strained. Please don't do this. We can fix it. We'll pay it back. I leaned against the kitchen counter, my knees suddenly weak. Pay it back how? I asked quietly. With what money? There was a pause. Then, we'll figure it out. You don't have to involve lawyers. This will destroy the family. Destroy the family. I closed my eyes. You're worried about destruction now? My dad took the phone from her. I could hear it in the shift of his breathing. You're taking this too far, he said. You're making us look like criminals. You took money that wasn't yours, I replied. What does that make you? Silence. Then his tone changed. Softer. Calculated. You've always been strong, Sophia. You landed on your feet. You're doing fine. That word again. Fine. I walked 2 miles in the rain last winter because I couldn't afford a bus pass, I said. I skipped meals. I worked until my hands shook. That wasn't fine. That was survival. It's come. You didn't ask for help, my mom whispered in the background. I laughed softly. You taught me not to. That night, my grandfather called. I'm so sorry, he said before I could speak. His voice was steady, but heavy with regret. I trusted them. I should have checked. You couldn't have known, I said. I could have, he replied. And I'm going to do what I should have done years ago. We met the next morning, just the two of us. He told me he had contacted the bank, that he was changing his will, that any future funds meant for me would be protected legally, transparently, untouchable. I won't let this happen again, he said. For the first time since Thanksgiving, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief. Validation. When I got home, I stared at the legal forms on my laptop. My parents' messages sat unread. Their voices echoed in my head: family, forgive, let it go. But another voice was louder now, the one that said, if you don't stand up here, you'll be carrying this forever. So I signed my name. Not because I wanted to hurt them, but because choosing myself was long overdue. I didn't plan to see them again so soon. But family has a way of pretending that time alone can erase damage, that silence is the same as forgiveness. 2 weeks after Thanksgiving, my grandfather told me everyone would be together again for Christmas. You don't have to come, he said carefully. Not if you're not ready. I thought about it all night, then I said yes. Not because I missed them, but because there were things that couldn't stay unsaid. The house looked exactly the same when I walked in: warm lights, soft music, the smell of cinnamon and roasted meat. Anyone from the outside would have thought this was a perfect family gathering. My parents froze when they saw me. My mom tried to smile. It didn't reach her eyes. My dad nodded once, stiff, like we were strangers sharing the same space by accident. Dinner was unbearable. Every word felt rehearsed, every laugh too loud. No one mentioned Thanksgiving. No one mentioned the fund. They spoke about weather, traffic, anything safe enough to avoid the truth sitting at the table with us. After dessert, my dad stood up to give his usual speech. To family, he said, lifting his glass. To sticking together no matter what. Something inside me snapped, not loudly, not dramatically, just enough to make me stand. Except when it mattered, I said. Every head turned. I reached into my bag and pulled out a thin folder, setting it on the table. That's the full record, I continued, my voice steady despite the way my heart was pounding. Every withdrawal, every date, every signature. In case anyone still thinks this is a misunderstanding. My mom's breath hitched. My dad's face hardened. You went to a lawyer, he said flatly. I went to protect myself, I replied. My brother finally looked up from his phone. Some of that money helped me, he said quietly. It wasn't all for them, I know, I said, meeting his eyes. And that doesn't make it right. My grandfather stood beside me then. Legal proceedings are already in motion, he said calmly. This will be handled properly. My mom started crying. My dad pushed his chair back, furious. You'd really do this? He demanded. You'd tear this family apart? I shook my head. No. You did that when you decided I didn't deserve honesty. I picked up the folder and turned toward the door. I'm not here to punish anyone, I said. I'm here to end the lie. No one stopped me as I left, and for the first time, the silence behind me didn't feel heavy. It felt final. A week after Christmas, a letter arrived from the bank. The investigation was official. They didn't use dramatic language, no accusations, just facts, dates, amounts, authorizations. If misappropriation could be proven, restitution would be required. Everything would be handled through proper legal channels. I didn't feel victorious. I felt lighter. My grandfather helped me open a new account in my name only. Transparent, protected. For the first time, something meant for my future actually felt like it belonged to me. Not as a secret, not as leverage, not as a favor. I paid down part of my student loans. I didn't erase them all, but I finally stopped drowning. Spring came quickly after that. I graduated. I accepted a full-time job offer I had earned on my own. I moved into a small apartment with creaky floors and sunlight in the mornings. I bought myself a decent pair of shoes, nothing fancy, just solid, reliable. Mine. I haven't spoken to my parents since Christmas. Sometimes that still hurts. But it hurts less than pretending everything was fine. Because the truth is, losing the money wasn't the worst part. Losing trust was. And finding my voice, that was everything. I didn't win a fortune. I reclaimed my future, and for the first time in my life, I'm building it with my eyes wide open.